Hello and welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host. Today I'm really excited because I think it might be the first time that I am having an administrator in training who's doing their residency. I know for certain it's the first time I'm having someone from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. She's a senior at the Healthcare and Administration program. Her name is Kendra VandenHeuvel. How did I do with your last name, Kendra?
You did beautiful. Perfect.
Kendra, I'm excited to have you on the program because one of the things I've been working hard at in the last year or two is one is combating the negative perception about long-term care, but two, in the same vein, doing our best to bring over younger generation, Gen Zs, into this industry. So basically to make sure the younger generation is helping the older generation. Tell me why you decided to work in long-term care.
Yeah, so my story I feel is kind of unique because I got my CNA as I was a senior in high school. And like throughout my high school years, I always wanted to do something in business. And then my senior year, I was like, no, I'm going to do nursing. And then I ended up at an assisted living right after I got my CNA. I loved it. I loved the connections I made, but I was like, if I want to go further with nursing, you're always told like, go to a hospital, you'll get more experience. So I went to a hospital, and personally, I hated it. I didn't like it because I didn't get the connections with the people like I did in an assisted living. So then after that, I went back to the assisted living, and then I'm like, okay, is nursing what I want to do? Like I really have this business aspect, but I also really have that passion for the elderly and nursing in general. So I kind of sat down with my dad and I'm like, let's brainstorm. Like, what can I do? And my dad knew he works building construction, so he knows a lot of people, and he knows an administrator at a nursing home, and he's like, I'll connect you with her. So I talked with her and I'm like, this is perfect. I can advocate for residents. I can get that connection with the elderly, and I can use my business side of my personality as well. So that's how I found this.
I love the passion. Anyone who watches this recording or watches or listens to your voice on the podcast is going to be like, how do I find more Kendra? So before I ask that question, my follow-up question is, I really like the language you use, the messaging, the copy that you use. You said you wanted a place where you would find connection. And so my next question for you is, when you're talking to someone your age who's not in healthcare, you know, you're talking to someone who's only studying business but not in healthcare, or you're talking to a friend who's an architect, or you're talking to a friend who's a sociologist, how would you explain to them what you mean by why you went from acute to post-acute for connection? Can you elaborate on what you mean by connection?
Yeah, so I feel like generations have changed so rapidly, and that, if you're in architecture, like you said, or whatever you go through, you'll have those connections, but it's all around the same age, I guess. And I like with the elderly where you learn so much because things were so different in their day and age. So that's the kind of connection that I look for. And I also just feel like you have more of a purpose because you're serving the generation that used to serve us in a way. So that's the connection I look for. And I guess everyone's looking for something different, but that's where I find my purpose, is helping the generation that used to help us.
How old are you, Kendra?
I'm 22. I'm going to be 23 in June.
Well, the words of wisdom make it sound like you are 72. Anyone who's watching is going to know that you're 50 years younger. How do you think you develop the emotional intelligence, the maturity to explain at the age of 22 you're already looking for purpose? Is that something that your family taught you? Is it something that you think at the age of 15 you already wired a little bit differently? Have you also learned from seniors that you've been working with in the last year?
Yeah, that's a good question. That really gets me thinking. But I think part of it is I grew up in a family of farmers. So like that kind of comes from my hard work ethic. And I've learned from my parents, my grandparents, they've always just had that hard work ethic. And I've admired that and wanted to find something that, one, I was as passionate about, one, or two, I'm as hardworking about. And also, I don't know, I just feel like I got my work ethic from them, which kind of made me mature a bit faster. And I also feel like some of my life experiences just unfortunately, but fortunately made me grow up a little bit faster than others.
One of the your generation gets dumped on a lot by mine. I'm 42, and pretty much anyone from the age of 35 to about 55, when Gen Zs aren't around, will say they're lazy, they'd rather stay at home, they'd rather not work. And usually I try to defend you, even though you're not there. And I said, it's not that. They want to do something that actually matters. So that lines up with what you said with purpose. Would you agree that purpose is critical in recruiting someone from your generation?
Yeah, I would agree completely. When like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of what I'm looking for in a job is purpose, like I touched on, but also just like the culture there and getting the connections with the elderly, but also with one another. So I think that is definitely, money is one thing. Money can only do so much though, you still have to have that culture and purpose.
I'm gonna go back a couple questions, specifically to the point where you realized acute wasn't for you, but long-term care was. And I'm gonna challenge you, if you were a CEO or you were a senior executive in HR and you're in a long-term care facility, how do you recommend they go about recruiting Kendra when she's 15 into becoming a CNA, or recruiting Kendra into long-term care when she's 20 and she's thinking about going into a hospital? How do you translate that connection into saying, hey, over here, you're going to make a difference? Do you put that into your job description? Do you put that into a video? Do you translate that in the interview? How do we get more attention of people like you?
I think if we were talking specifically to my generation, I would say like a short video because we all know TikTok has destroyed our generation and our attention spans are only this big. So if we have a short little clip out there and it's talking about connections and maybe even showing a connection of me and a resident or something like that, I think that really draws people. And then once you get them in the door, you can connect with them. Like I could use my scenario where I'm like, yeah, the hospital is great to learn those skills and things like more fast paced. But if you really want the connection and having that extra sense of purpose, I think long-term care is where you should go.
I'm glad you said video, because I also believe that's the way that we're going to make a difference and combat the staffing crisis. So I my next question is, I'm going to trick you into I'm going to trick you into doing what I think will make a difference, but I'm going to tell you ahead of time. I'm going to ask you to think of a mentor that you have in long-term care and the impact that they've had on you, how they've made you a stronger woman, a smarter woman, a well-balanced human being who's making an impact. And then I'm going to ask you afterwards, if I showed that video to 10 of your friends who are thinking about working at Walmart or working at McDonald's, and rather they could be a CNA, do you think I could get at least half of your friends to consider to become a CNA? So with that being said, now, what mentor you're thinking of, if you feel comfortable, feel free to say his or her name, and tell me about how amazing a leader is and why you feel blessed to have worked underneath them.
So the first person that came to mind is Taya Walk, who's my preceptor, but is also the administrator here. She shows like she's out on the floor a lot, which is super nice because I feel like there's always this stigma where, oh, administration's around and I better be working or I better be doing stuff. But she doesn't bring that feeling to the floor. She's just truly there to make sure everything's going okay, lend a hand if need be. So she does that very well, but then she also knows the clinical aspect of it and knows right versus wrong, basically knows the regulations like the back of her hand. So I really admire her and go to her for a lot of questions because she has that passion and I can see it when she's out on the floor. And then she also knows what she's doing. So I'm like, okay, how do I do that? How do I be her kind of thing in my own way?
You might be too young to be able to answer this yet, because I don't think I could have answered it when I was 32, let alone 22. But what are you learning about her outside of your profession? What are you learning as Kendra when you go home that long-term care is having an impact on you as a human being?
So this might not be the quote unquote right answer, but it's actually kind of funny you bring that up because for school we had to do this leadership development plan working on your goals and personal goals as well. And in my personal goals, I was like self-care and working on myself. And Taya was like, I need to do that. Like she was like, I need to learn from you on those things. So I mean, she definitely has that outside life, but I think that's something she's still working on, you know, as she's going in her career as well.
In terms of kind of old generation versus new generation and motivation, if I am an old school boss in long-term care and I believe, you know, the way things should be run is job description posted on the internet, you apply, you come in, and I'm going to interview you and make you feel uncomfortable. I'm going to try and intimidate you. Then when I hire you, my onboarding is going to be old school. I'm going to do check-ins maybe once a month with you, and then I'm going to write you up. What is your advice to that old school way of thinking, saying, hey, do it differently. Here's how you do it. Here's how you recruit us. Here's how you motivate us. Here's how you empower us. And can you, if you feel comfortable, speak in positive terms, because for, you know, for us to change that old school mentality, we also have to make that person feel comfortable. Hey, this is not just about E for effort. This is about really, really caring about younger generation.
Yeah, I think I've already kind of ran into this sometimes with our orientation process and stuff. And they will look at me and be like, well, Kendra, I know, you know, this age group is kind of with you. I'm like, yeah. So I kind of just remind them, like, personally, something that I would find attractive or, you know, I guess attractive would be videos and, like, I guess for recruiting, like social media and things like that, instead of just an old job description, because our job descriptions are very outdated and they're just on a website. So I try to encourage them from my point of view and get them to look kind of outside of the box on those.
If I, you know, held your hand to the fire and said, how would you go about translating your organization's mission into a new way that would capture Gen Z's attention? How would you go about doing that? Would you sing the mission? Would you write the mission on a big wall? Would you do graffiti of the mission? Would you make a cool word cloud of the mission? Like, give me some newized way where before I was forced to memorize a mission. Today, I need to a mission needs to talk to your heart, needs to talk to your mind.
So the first thing I kind of thought of is that I've seen done at other facilities that I think would be really cool to do here is if you see someone displaying that mission, to give them like a pin that says whatever part of the mission that they displayed. And then if they hit all those spots, then they get some type of reward or some type of award. I like that. And then also just like displaying it, we have a lot of boards in the employee break room. So like you said, like graffiti or chalk or something that is very visually appealing, I think is another way to go. And then also just thanking your staff face to face when you see them doing something good. I think that's most important, is to get that person to person interaction.
I interviewed someone at a convention about a month or two ago, and he was a Gen Z CNA, and he said, Peter, here's what needs to be done. When I walk into a long-term care community, one, I want to feel like I'm meeting my potential mentor. And two, when I walk into that place, I want to feel like I'm walking into a place of people, not a company. Does that resonate with you? And if that's the case, like today, if I'm a CNA and I walk in, how would you show me at the place where you're doing your residency, hey, this is a place of people, and Peter, you're going to find someone who's going to encourage you to be a more fuller, bigger human being?
Yeah, I think it honestly starts with the basics and just recognizing them as a human being and getting to know names for sure. And hey, Ricky, how was your weekend? Or and make sure you don't always ask weekend because they work 24/7. But you know, how was your night? Or if you know their hobbies, ask them about those, and just really connecting to them as a person. I think that's where you create that culture and it makes it feel like a people place instead of a business.
Kendra, I've really enjoyed having you on LTC Heroes. I appreciate it. Do you have any last asks that you have of us older generation and how we can bring in a newer generation to take care of America's seniors?
I do not think so, but I appreciate being on the show today. It was a
I,
blast.
I, I love your passion, and I think that it's contagious. And here's a round of applause for more Kendras in long-term care. Thank you.